Metaphysics, the study of what is to exist, and theory of knowledge, the thinking about the possibility to know and the validation of this knowledge, are two branches of philosophy. However, they come together in the history of philosophy because when philosophers wonder about the things, they also wonder about the possibility to know these things. And they want answers that are valid. And this is what is the reflection in theory of knowledge. So since the antiquity and the farther we go to the past, remember that the knowledge is less specialized, and therefore these philosophers wonder about earthquakes, stars, the moon, the seas, the plants, the animals, the humans, the gods, the soul, the existence in itself, the universe, the origin of the things. So, since the antiquity, these philosophers wonder about the things, the causes of the things, and the problem if the changes are real or apparent. If there is something permanent, and if the existence is about what changes or what is permanent. This is the reflection in metaphysics. On the other hand, as we have said, they want to be certain about their answers. They wanted to pursue knowledge by human faculties, what makes different philosophy of religion or other fields in which the knowledge is revealed by the gods or God, and philosophers that want to obtain the knowledge by themselves with their human faculties. But they want to obtain the knowledge and be certain about the answers. So this is the part of epistemology. The Greeks, remember, had two different words. One is doxa, opinion. Everyone can have opinion. And episteme, the founded knowledge and therefore valid. And in many cases, episteme is considered the truth, the reliable and valid and exact knowledge. In general, we can say that the Greeks answered to the question that yes, we can know the universe. We, we can know and we can understand. So the universe is knowable and intelligible. It's important. It's not only that we obtain information, but we can give meaning to this information. We can make sense of this information. So it is intelligible. The knowledge of the things or the knowledge of the reality comes from the senses, but we have to make sense of this in our mind. Therefore, the two things are important, and philosophers will give more or less to each one of these parts. The information we obtain through the senses and the reasoning about this. But in general, the Greeks developed logic to um, talk about the rules for reasoning. How is that we deduce correctly the things? How is that we deduce incorrectly the things, fallacies? And Aristotle put all this together, systematized the logic in a book that is called the Organon. The tool of the mind is the logic. Also, the categories we employ to know the reality. And many philosophers and scientists accuse Greeks of confusing thinking and reality. And yes, in part it is true. But on the other hand, all philosophers, all scientists require logic, reasoning to know the reality. Can we trust our senses? This is very important. We know that senses deceive us. As we commit mistakes in reasoning, we also commit mistakes in the perception of the things. And we have to take this into account when we talk about knowledge. So the Greeks developed two positions about the things and the possibility to know. Heraclitus talk about this impossibility to know because things are changing. No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river as it's flowing is not the same, and he's not the same man because every day we are changing. So from this world of sensations, sensible world that we know through the senses, we cannot know anything. We can have opinions, but we cannot really know. Parmenides applied logic in this identification between reality and thinking, and through logic tries to demonstrate that we can know, but this reality that we know through the senses is not the reality, is deceiving. So he comes from this logic that whatever is. What exists exists, or the being exists. What is not cannot be. The nothing doesn't exist, and we cannot think about this. Therefore, the being exists and is immutable, eternal. Why? Because if the being changed, it will change to something that is not, but the is not cannot exist. Or the contrary, if it comes from other thing, it comes from what it is not to become what it is. But what is not doesn't exist. So applying this logic, what exists, the being, is one, eternal, immutable, illimited, and the sensible world is illusory, and these changes that we see are illusory, and from this we can have only doxa, opinions about the world. Reconciling these two positions will be the work of all philosophers that follow Parmenides and Heraclitus. So the solution of Plato is to create two different worlds. The sensible world of changes that in reality doesn't exist, and the world of the ideas. Each idea is like the being in Parmenides, is immutable, is eternal, doesn't change. So the things in this world participate of the existence, but what exists in itself, by itself, is the idea, or the ideas exist in themselves and by themselves. This is the reality, the world of the things we observe through the senses is not real. But in the world of ideas, what knows is the soul. So when we incarnate, we forget, and knowing is kind of remembering. Our senses are not trustful. Aristotle criticizes this solution. He says Plato is duplicating the problem, is creating um, another word that doesn't need to be there. But what exists is the things around us that change, that are mutable, that we can touch and smell and see. And the ideas of Plato, says Aristotle, ideas are only generalizations we create of the things. Remember this question of classifying the things, the categories uh, of the thinking. From different dogs, we create an idea of a dog. But what exists is the individual dog, not the idea of dog. Nothing in the mind is that has not passed through the senses. So each individual thing is what exists, the primary essences. Or in more modern vocabulary, entities is what exists. Each thing is composed by matter and form. They are inseparable. We can think about two different things, but in the reality, they come together.